Welcome to Mastering Social Business, the #1 podcast for the do-it-yourself small business owners and entrepreneurs that want to learn the secrets of how to leverage social media and turn it into profit.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. My name is Kelly Mirabella, and I am the owner and trainer over at Stellar Media Marketing and Club Stellar. I help busy professionals learn how to use social media for their business and marketing, and I can help you too. Learn more at stellarmediamarketing.com.
And I'm Paul Serwin, business coach with Business All-Star. I help entrepreneurs and small businesses uncover and profit from the untapped assets to be found in your business. I work with you to develop solid brand development and business growth strategies that will help you get in front of qualified and highly motivated prospects that want to spend money with you right now. If you want more information about my business coaching and other services, check out businessallstar.com. We're very excited today. We've got a special guest with us, Dr. Jim Barry. If you listened to us back on episode 92, Dr. Jim Barry joined us at that point. If you haven't, let me tell you a little bit about him. He's a 25-year veteran of the corporate world with experience in industrial, government, and commercial marketing. He's an NSU marketing professor, and Jim's teaching experience covers a wide range of internet marketing, social media, and international business courses. He's also the founder of Social Content Marketing, his social media marketing company that conducts corporate workshops and webinars for companies seeking to transform their traditional selling approaches to social selling. The company also develops integrated social media and search engine marketing solutions for professional services throughout Southern Florida. And it's our pleasure to welcome you back today again, Jim. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Paul. Thank you, Kelly.
Yeah, thanks for coming back on. I'm super excited because this is kind of like a topic that's right up my alley of something I want to learn more about.
Yeah, in fact, I think it's very relevant today. So what we're going to talk about is, I've used this term called shipping content with an emotional twist. We have a lot of other terms people use, like amplified, electrified. You've heard the terms. Mm-hmm. So as my students and I were working on this, we realized there's an acronym that calls it for what it is. It's really you're shipping your content with emotion surrounding it. It's not ready to be exposed yet. It's not ready to be linked, but you're doing something to really connect at an emotional level. And why that's so important is you've probably seen a lot of these statistics floating around. Like in the last 2 years, we've collected more data than in the history of the world. We have now 400 million registered blogs. In other words, brands really got this content marketing concept and they jumped on it. So you guys have seen it. You know, you're getting swarmed with all this content to where we kind of run out of gimmicks to make ourselves stand out. So we look back at what are people really doing to differentiate, and invariably it was all based on emotion. So we saw this big wave of storytelling last year. Then you saw the visual storytelling develop. Mm-hmm. We're seeing humor develop, not only for B2C, but even in the B2B ranks. You're hearing these terms like, well, it has to be inspiring and entertaining. So what I was hoping to do with you guys is kind of take you through all the different ways that we found you could make your content far more engaging by making it emotional. So are you ready to go?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so remember we have this acronym called shipping. The S stands for surprise. And this is where we've seen like a lot of videos where, surprise by itself is not an emotion. You have to add something to it. So let's take the happy emotions. So very intriguing video that came up about 6 months ago, is now up to over 40 million shares, is the one that WestJet did for a Christmas surprise. This video caught a lot of people by surprise when they went to the airport during Christmas and they saw this kiosk with a Santa Claus, and Santa Claus was asking them what they want. And then before they landed, all these WestJet people got together and found all their gifts. I mean, people were getting like flat screen TVs, whatever. Gosh. And it put tears in people's eyes when the bell rings, for your luggage to come down. It started to all the presents came down. So that would be sort of an example of, here's a company that hardly any people even knew about them, and now they all kind of associate them with this warm surprise. And then what we're seeing also is a wave of a lot of these flash mobs. Mm-hmm. So it started out, you remember like the one that T-Mobile did at a train station? Mm-hmm. A couple of people kind of broke out in a song, and then all of a sudden it turned out to be 50 people, then hundreds of people, almost looked like 1,000 people towards the end. And what it does is it brings out the cameras. So people start tweeting what they saw, and before you know it, that content can really go viral. So that's a powerful thing you get out of, like, surprises when it involves spontaneity, even pranks. And a great one that came out recently was the Nelson Mandela University. It was showing a scene inside their cafeteria, and it appeared like a couple of guys were just changing a light bulb and taking out the garbage, and they started singing in a cappella. And a few other people joined in, and before you know it, there was another crowd that developed. So that seems to be a great way to get the surprise going in a happy way. But we're also seeing it on sort of a startling way, too. There was a trailer for Carrie, the movie Carrie, where you walk in this coffee shop and they had it all rigged to where it looked like this woman was possessed, and then when she waves her hands, people were going up a wall. And
I've seen that one.
You saw that one?
Yeah, that was crazy.
So we're seeing a lot of this. The other thing that works well in surprise sometimes is just a change in routine. You know, Beyonce did that with her latest release of songs where she just decided to go social media. But you're seeing, like, even airlines, Virgin Atlantic has this real kind of off-the-wall safety video, highly entertaining, very comic. Okay, so that's the S of shipping. The H is what we call humanizing. So if you think about how this first started, I think we've all understood that it's important not to have a corporate speak, people call Franken-speak. You know, you have to sound like a human. But we're starting to see sort of a new development in this area where companies are actually sporting a personality. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, the first one that comes to mind to me is Chipotle. So, you know, they have all these videos. In fact, some of them now are even part of a sitcom series on Netflix. That people now see sort of this humorous side to them. But at the same time, the reason why we think the emotion is so important is it gives you an opportunity to share values. So rather than telling people, like, read all my content, learn all this stuff, it's more of, do you connect with me on this concept called cultivating a better world, you know, going organic or something like that. And then if you do, maybe that connection will override all the information to where you're buying things from me because we have shared values. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing more and more of that. We're also seeing a lot of, I call it like the love and friendship. We looked at a lot of videos that Hallmark did very well for a lot of years. You know, the dad and daughter special moments, or, you know, somebody overseas in the military, you know, having a private conversation with their wives. Mm-hmm. And the third one we think relates more to just empathy. So you can humanize your content a lot just by showing that you have a legitimate interest in your customer base. You know, somebody that strikes me that does this really well, Ree Drummond, known as the Pioneer Woman. Mm-hmm. Here's a classic case where she gets millions of subscribers to her blog. And when you ask people, like, well, what was so fascinating about it? Is it the recipes? They say, no, they just connect with who she is. She was this a very aspiring corporate attorney who left the field and married a cowboy. The connection, we think, is more of women that are dying to be like that. You know, I wish I could kind of leave my hectic lifestyle and have a simpler life. So those are the areas of humanizing where we see are really gaining traction. Now, this third one is where we're really seeing the difference, and that's inspiration. If it has something to do with life changes or pushing yourself to the limits or reassurance, this is where you can get a lot of traction. You know, let me give you a few examples of this. Nike did a great piece on this very overweight younger kid running from a distance. And I mean, talk about low production, was just this kid running on down the street, but he was about 100 pounds overweight.
I saw this one. I know what you're talking about.
So you could kind of relate to that? Mm-hmm. Why would you say it was so inspiring to you, though?
Well, because it's like, first of all, we have big issues in the United States, especially with, obese children and stuff. So this is a big issue. And many of us can relate to that. And many of us are parents that can relate to that. But to see that, this kid can do it, and it just takes those baby steps, essentially. It was really a good story. And it was very simple. And I think that that's an important thing, is that it doesn't have to be a big production for the story to get across.
Yeah, that's what we're finding. And I mentioned to a lot of students too. I said, you have to figure out, though, why does it really inspire you? Because there's some of people actually dying. And I often wonder, it's like, well, what do we really take from that? I think what we really take from it is I'm very thankful for my blessings. I thought Dove did a great job on this one. It was called their beauty sketches.
That one was amazing.
The stats on that, it's each one is like 10 to 20 million views. And I don't know if you're familiar with this, Paul, but basically what Dove did was they brought in these women to describe themselves to be sketched. And then the women left and they brought in somebody else that knew of them or saw them, and they described them. At the end, the message is that we have low self-esteem, that the pictures of ourselves are far worse or unattractive than how people see us. And again, it kind of, that sort of thing just brings tears to the eyes. So the other area of inspiration that seems to work well is where you help people get those eureka moments, like, as a result of seeing this, I realize I really do have a talent that I want to take a chance on. Okay, so then we move to what's just called playfulness. And we see a few aspects of this. I think that this whole concept of playfulness to create emotion really started out with what we call gamification games, the Farmville, for example. That doesn't seem to get near as much attraction, though, as humor.
Or even BuzzFeed, would that fall into this, where people are always sharing these on Facebook, where you take like a quiz and it tells you what 80s movie are you, or that sort of thing.
Yeah, and you've seen a lot of these like these mind games on LinkedIn updates, the math, finding your way through this maze. But we're not seeing much traction because we're thinking that it may be participative, but we don't know if it really creates an emotional bond. The part of playfulness that really creates the emotional is humor. So at Nova, about 2 years ago, we started examining 3,000 videos that performed over 50,000 views each. And I was kind of amazed at how many of them were humor-based. But it was over 75%. Now, out of the remaining 25%, all but 5% dealt with some aspect of entertainment, like something astonishing, performance drama, some kind of artistic development, things like that. But the bulk of it was being funny. So, we learn a lot from commercials. And now you're starting to see it in all these social videos. So, for example, in the theory for humor, they say the three types of humor that works really well is one is it's sort of a comic wit. In other words, I see something out of sorts. What is Betty White doing playing in football? Or what is that little baby doing breakdancing? Or the other baby trading stocks? You see like the wrong temperament in a particular role, some kind of irony. And that's a great way to produce this emotional connection because, again, it's sort of a low production. I ask a lot of my students, I'll ask them, what advertisement do you guys see on Route 95? Now, there's got to be at least 50 of these billboards out there. And they all invariably say, the one that says, is your wife hot? Because our instant reaction is, did I get that right? So where humor could work really well and affordably is just do a piece of irony where you see something out of sorts, or it's an individual playing the wrong character. All those would kind of work really well. Now, the second part of humor, a lot of people don't like using, and you have to be careful with it, but it's highly effective, especially in terms of engagement, and that's put downs. So the theory on superiority basically says that we relish when people at other people's misfortunes. Now, they could be just poking fun of their inferiorities, like Flo in the Progressive commercials.
Yes.
Somebody that's considered, like in a guy's case, it would be a Bubba, the blonde jokes, something about someone's character, that does really work well. And I think the care that we can take to make it really work well on social media is make yourself more quirky. Don't bash a particular gender, but kind of make yourself poke fun of yourself in the spirit of making a more humble connection. So that's kind of what we derive from that. The other thing is a lot of times we just like making fun of unfortunate circumstances, especially if you're knocking down those people that we don't like. So, for example, like politicians, a judge, a professor, there's nothing better than to knock them down a notch. Or like macho moments gone bad. The guy's really cool. All right. The third aspect of humor that works well is based on what's called this release theory. It's a little more difficult to highlight in social videos. We see a lot of commercials where people just start screaming for no reason. They get very aggressive. And it's basically, it's releasing yourself of those inhibitions. Like somebody who's really stiff and stodgy, all of a sudden dancing in the middle of everybody. Kind of unleashing what you've always had to restrain yourself from doing. So that's on the humor side. So we have humor, then we have gamification. Where we're seeing a lot of traction, though, also is in these 3D animated stories. So it started out with Chipotle. Now we're seeing like TSB Bank. People are finding a lot of software to do this where you can kind of paint the whole story of what your company was like. And it's a great way to roll out a story where you get the music background and you don't have to cast real characters. Mm-hmm. All right, so there we have surprise, humanizing, inspiration, and playfulness. Next one we call passion. And there's, again, like 3 elements of this. High on that list is just overall compassion. You can take as an excellent example where that works is if you ever see some of those commercials on abused dogs.
Oh, yes, with the Sarah McLachlan in the background.
Yeah, how's that make you feel?
I have to mute those commercials because I get so depressed.
Yeah. So you can tell it really taps into you emotionally.
It does, those puppy faces.
Yeah. But sometimes I don't think you even have to go that far. There's a category we also call proud and touching moments. There was a great video of a woman that was departing an airplane, and at the gate, as she was dressed up in her military suit, up to about 30 or 50 people had stood up and saluted her.
Wow.
And it was just a touching moment, basically saying, here's how we appreciate your service to the country. If you remember, during the 9/11, Budweiser stepped up with their Clydesdales.
Yeah.
And as they were approaching the 9/11 building from a distant park, they all bowed. So just things like that, even when you just talk about it, it sort of rouses an emotion. Another area of passion can work really well is actually, I would just call it like admiration. Just take kids going to concerts. Mm-hmm. So that's why we really support a lot of celebrities. This next one, there's so many stats saying that this is the key to emotion, and that is just using imagery. So we're starting to hear a lot about it's not just a photo, it's actually visual storytelling.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot on the show too.
Yeah, and you could see that now in all these blogs going almost, if they're not a video blog, they're very rich in photographs. And Facebook, obviously, their move towards getting into the mobile platform was because they saw the impact that visuals have, which is sort of the preferred format for mobile. Mm-hmm. We took a look at all the images that really worked well, and we broke them down into 3 categories. So one is if the image has something to do with sentiment that could really strike an emotional chord. So if it's nostalgic, you see all these photos now of people taking you back to 1920s, 1940s, mm-hmm. showing your connection with your old car. That seems to work very effectively. The next category I would say is more of provocation. So unlike the sentiment, okay, we love seeing cats and dogs and nostalgia. This is one where you're really out to make a statement.
Yeah.
So I think in our blog we use the example of Lady Gaga. And you have the last category, and you see this a lot in Twitter. Mm-hmm. An awful lot of those photos relate to what I would call just serenity.
And this is a lot you see with quotes and stuff.
Yeah. In fact, invariably, behind that quote is just some breathtaking waterfall scene or something mm-hmm. involved natural setting to where I can kind of take a breath. So those are the 3. The other ones we're not finding to be as effective in imagery. All these selfies, if it doesn't really fit sentiment or you're provoking something or serenity, there's no real evidence to say it's going to have an emotional attachment.
Right.
All right, now here's the one that I'm very excited about is the narratives. So I don't know about you guys, when I first started hearing all the storytelling, and you look at all the blogs we saw on it, right about the start of the year. And people started making even predictions in 2014. This is the year of the story. Like, really? Don't we always tell stories? But we're starting to see them played out very effectively, where people are starting to write their content with a very familiar story arc. It's got a hero. It's got a villain. It's got a challenge the person has to go through. And so there we looked at, all right, so what makes an effective story? High on that list was a lot of these change in the world. It's, we want you to join our crusade to make this a more eco-friendly world, or one that accepts the little guy. So the second category, we call enterprising, becomes more of a story about going after big corporate America. We've seen a lot of these. Like, if you're familiar with the Dollar Shave.
Yeah, Dollar Shave Club.
Oh, yeah. I know what you're talking about.
That would be a great example of, his story really is all about going after these
big brands,
companies that, they're spending a lot of money in the wrong areas. So he does sort of this parody on, how a corporation is just going to waste your money on hiring Roger Federer to pay for the advertisements. Like 90 cents of the dollar goes towards him. And he does it in sort of an off-the-wall way, but he does it in a storyline format that relates to going after corporate America. And then we see a lot of this even in the UK. There's a denim company that was about to go under, and they got some last-minute financing where the whole county kind of rallied around a new group of investors because they didn't want big corporations taking over. So that seems to strike an emotional chord because there's always that plea for the little guy.
Right.
Then the third category of stories that seems to work well is sort of that heartbreak to triumph. So in the story arc, if you could almost start it off with, here's a case of a lost soul, somebody who's maybe finds themselves even terribly handicapped. Look at the obstacles they went through, and you find yourself engaging with your audience because they're pulling for you all the way. And kind of common to all this storytelling is you got to be rooting for somebody or pulling for them. Otherwise, it may be more of a fascination, but not necessarily tying into an emotion. All right, so that brings us to this category called generosity. Some of these involve storylines, but they're getting a lot of traction where, WestJet would be an example of generosity. Look at what these people did for those folks when they land on their aircraft. But at a smaller scale, we're seeing ones like Duracell. They had a bus station in the midst of this town where it was known to be like 10 below zero. And they showed these people, just frigid in 20-mile-an-hour winds. And what they did was, if you walk into the bus station, there was this like glove print that you could put your hand in front of, and it warms you up.
Wow.
And, just gestures like that, again, they get like 10 million views out of it because people just love the fact that you're doing something out of your heart. But there's other aspects of generosity we're seeing that play well. Anytime you're involved in a cause that leads to corporate goodwill, or community contributions, something where you walk away and they say, what a great citizen, especially if it's social responsibility, you could make a real emotional connect. So in general, that's kind of what we're finding is that if you surprise people, and especially if it's with happiness associated with it, but you can startle them as well. If you humanize yourself by building a personality around your brand, so you are the next Reed Drummond, you're not just about recipes. People are falling in love with you personally. And if you inspire them in the process, especially if it's related to, change in their life or letting them discover something that they didn't realize they had as a talent, that works well. Then in this next area, it becomes more of humor, games, 3D animation, and it's more of like in a playful manner. Then we have the passion, where basically I'm going to tap into you in very real time. I'm going to touch your heart with some real proud moments that could be related to your patriotism, your team, but it might be a passion I stir just with your admiration. I could find ways to maybe astonish you, show you how far you can push the human potential. I saw this one where this woman was actually shooting an arrow with her feet behind her head.
Wow.
And the emotion there is like, I was just in awe, or somebody's, masterful craftsmanship. Somebody did an ice sculpture, and you just kind of look at it. Well, that works well on building an emotion. We also have imagery, where we understand that if you could connect with somebody through sentiment. It's why we have a lot of images on dogs and cats, or it could just be something nostalgic. You can get a lot of traction. But also if you did something that's just provocative, you could connect with people by stirring up their emotions to rise up against something they oppose. Then the third way for those visuals to work, show scenes of serenity, especially if it, like you were talking about, Kelly, if it matches up well with an inspirational quote, could be another way. But storytelling seems to be the one that's going to make the big difference. Those stories that talk about changing the world, join our cause. If it's something that's enterprising, where you can visit like a company's heritage, where they take you through the time and the tough times that they've overcome, it goes well with those people that have always been fighting big corporate America. And then the last part of the narrative that seems to work well is where you have that heartbreak to triumph. We always want to root for somebody to make it.
Yeah.
So if they come in as an underdog and then we really see them succeeding at the end, that could really rouse our emotions. But there's one area that everybody seems to have their eyes on today. Is there's so much proof saying that if you do something generous, not just as a spur-of-the-moment gesture, but if it really leads to being benevolent as a corporation, it can go a long way. So we're seeing companies benefit in their brand from giving back to the community, or
jumping on causes.
Exactly. Changing the environment, being more socially responsible, eco-friendly. So that's in general what we're finding. So in the process of doing our social media, right after we're done with the educational part, like what elements you need from a blog to an ebook to webinar, then we say, before you think about connecting, what are all the things we could do to wrap this emotion around your package? Think of it as like your package of content's going to arrive with a ribbon around it. Those 8 methods that I mentioned are the ones that we have found empirically to work the best. So I hope that helped you guys.
Absolutely. There's some great information in there. And we were actually just chatting when we were trying to reconnect that there's just so many examples of people utilizing this more and more. You know, the one that comes to mind for me is the Bossy campaign, Sheryl Sandberg's Bossy campaign, that a lot of companies, you know, we see Pantene just did a commercial on the sorry, you know, with women saying sorry, and then they did it over again with women not saying sorry. What would that look like? And it's all tying into this Bossy campaign. You've seen a lot of brands jumping on this bandwagon. You talked about Dove, and Dove's been doing it for a long time before the Bossy campaign came on. But just like women empowerment seems to be a very hot topic right now. So a lot of those big women-based brands are capitalizing on that. But they're doing it very well and tastefully as well.
Yeah, and it has a lot of universal appeal. You know, I like the fact when they go after like low self-esteem, because all of us can relate to it. You know, it doesn't have to be like a heartbreak to triumph, where there's a rare occasion where somebody went from rags to riches. If you start really tapping into things like, you know, heartfelt moments between a father and his daughter, or dealing with self-esteem, you know, you're going to have a very widespread connection at the emotional level.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do see a lot of this idea. We talked about military being a big theme. I know Budweiser did their ads, many of their ads in the Super Bowl were military based and that sort of thing. So it is interesting that, you know, lately, especially most recent, I've seen a lot of these ideas, these concepts in there. But I was going to say, if you're listening and you check share, it is embedded on our show notes, and there's a ton of examples and video examples, and the whole layout is in there, and also all the ways you can connect with Jim, because I know that you wouldn't mind people reaching out and saying hi on Twitter or what have you.
Absolutely.
So check out the show notes for all that information.
Yeah, and thank you very much, Jim, for taking time and joining us once again on our show. We really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure, Paul, and thank you very much, Kelly.
That was some really awesome content, and it really makes a lot of sense for what we're really starting to see now, both commercially on, when we watch TV and we see print ads and online, to even what smaller businesses are starting to capture onto is this idea of storytelling and the elements of surprise and emotionally grabbing people. So I found that really interesting.
Yeah, I definitely found it really interesting as well. And, some great case studies that Jim was able to bring to really kind of show us how both big brands and small brands are integrating this type of content marketing into their social media strategies.
If you want to check out the full slideshow PowerPoint that Jim provided today, we have embedded it into our show notes. There's a ton of information. There's video examples, many of which he talked about in the show today. And definitely check that out. It's on SlideShare as well. And you can follow Jim Barry on SlideShare to see all of his PowerPoints. But we have that one on the show notes. You can also check out all the places you can connect with Jim. I know he's on Twitter. I chat with him every once in a while on Twitter myself. He's on LinkedIn. So check out the show notes for that.
Yeah, so definitely, check out Jim. He's got a lot of great information, and he's always putting new stuff out there. So definitely go to masteringsocialbusiness.com. Check out the show notes here for our interview with Jim Barry to figure out how you can get in touch with him. And we encourage you to connect with him. Let him know that you enjoyed him appearing on our show.
Absolutely. And if you know somebody, or if you yourself would like to be a guest on our show, we are now conducting our show guest series, as we like to do at least once a year for kind of a whole series. Last summer, we did the whole day in the life, if you remember. And this year, we're trying to, tackle some local experts and people who are really good in their field of expertise in terms of social media and education and sales and productivity. So if any of those surrounding topics sounds like something you want to talk about or you're an expert in, reach out to us, show@masteringsocialbusiness.com, because we are doing our call for guests.
Yeah, and we've got a lot of great guests lined up over the next couple of weeks, which I'm sure you guys will enjoy. And you can always reach out to us on Twitter as well if you have a request to be on our show. I am at Leverage Success.
And I am at Stellar247.